Hi guys! So I decided to challenge myself a bit today, and I've taken out from my stash the Vivid Blooms by Spellbinder's cutting die set, which is a lovely floral arrangement set, but it's not typically autumny. However, I decided to make an autumnal card with these. Let's see how this works for me. So I have die cut them several times from white cardstock. Don't worry, I'll not be using all of those die cuts. I like to prepare more than what I need. That way I have them for some future makes. I have a 5 by 7 inch card base. Then I have just 1/8 of an inch smaller, so 4 7/8 by 6 7/8 of a white card, and then another piece measuring 4 3/4 by 6 3/4. And the smallest one I will be embossing with the Trellis embossing folder by Chloe's Creative Cards. And here you can see, after running it through my die cutting machine, it left my cardstock with that lovely detailed impression. I also have a die set. Here is the Essential Modern Ovals by Spellbinders, and I will be using these today. So with the largest one, I've die cut one oval, and then I took 2 of the smaller dies to cut out a frame. As you can see, I'm using white card for everything today, and I will be adding my own colors using different mediums. This is also great if you would like to use up some of your white scraps. Now in here you can just see me picking and choosing which ones of the die cuts I want to use for my arrangement today. There are a lot of different flowers in there. You can pick and choose and create different arrangements. Today I am using some of the flowers that have 2 or even 3 layers to them, so you'll see how lovely and dimensional this will look. So these are the bits that I picked out. Now I am going to use some embossing powders today, as well as some ink pads. I will walk you through the colors as we are going, and I'm using them. I picked out some lovely colors that I thought went well with the autumnal theme. Now, if you do not have embossing powders in all different colors, do not worry. You can use ink pads with clear embossing powder to turn them into beautiful embossed pieces, and I will demonstrate that for you in this video as well. I'm going to start with these layered blooms. For the solid layers, I am adding Vintage Photo Distress Oxiding to, just using my small blending brushes. And the top layer, which is the more detailed layer, I am dipping into my Wow embossing ink pad. If you don't like the feeling of the sticky ink on your fingers, you can always use a brayer to spread the ink. The embossing powder in here I'm using is the Turkish Coffee, which is gorgeous dark brown embossing powder. Again, if you do not have dark brown embossing powder, do not worry. Just use your brown inks with some clear embossing powder on top, and you will see just how in a little minute on some of my foliage. Quickly heat set the top layers, and you'll see how lovely these will layer together. Next, I'm moving on to my largest flower of the set, and I'm ink blending 2 different colors of Distress Oxidings, and here is a Mustard Seed and the Crackling Campfire. And for the stamen on this flower, which has 2 different pieces, I will use heat embossing on, and you'll see how easy it is to change your color if you don't like or you change your mind about the first one. Heat embossing is really magical. So if you're unsure which stamens or which layers to use on top of your flowers, just always refer back to the packaging. It will always show you what way they used it, but again, get creative and use them any way that you want. So on the solid piece of the stamen, you could see me using Chinese Lantern, which is a lovely orangey color. And on the more detailed piece of the stamen, I'm using Tarnished Brass, which is like almost like a vintage gold color. Absolutely love that brassy color in there. I'm heat setting them, trying to, if they don't blow away, on my cork board. And I like to use the cork coaster because I learned this from the ladies on the Wow Embossing channel, that this helps you melt your powders just a little bit quicker. And in here you could see that I did not like that orange because it blended in too much with the flower. So I changed it to Silk Brocade, which is a lovely purplish color. And this will stand out just that much more on my flower. I really love this color on it. So you can see how much darker that is than my actual flower in there. I'm much happier with that. But I'm going to say, if you're going to double dip your emboss piece into the ink pad, make sure it is cooled out well. You don't want to ruin your ink pad by sticking the melted powder into it. Moving on to the next couple of flowers. On the base layer of both of these, I'm using Wild Honey. And then you'll see me just dabbing very randomly some ripe persimmon in it as well. Not too much at all. A lot of this will be covered up anyway with the top layer. which I will be using some really lovely heat embossing technique. This will turn these flowers into some magical pieces, I'm telling you. So in here you can see I'm dabbing both into the Wow Embossing ink pad, and then I'm covering but just the bottom part of each of these layers in pomegranate Wow embossing powder. This is gorgeous dark red. I only covered the bottom part, but I will come back and just with my fingers I pick up just a little bit and sprinkling it onto the white parts as well. The reason I done that, because I want a lovely ombre look where two colors melt together, where I'm adding orange. This is the Chinese lantern all over these, but it will only stick to the bits where the red already hadn't stuck to. Heat setting them with my heat tool will melt those colors together, so the red dots that I sprinkled on the top will melt into that orange, and this gives me a gorgeous look to these flowers. They absolutely beautiful. Once I layer these on top of the base layer, which we inked up just a little minute ago, this is stunning. Honestly, you'll see how lovely these look on my finished card. Before moving on to my next bits, I figured it was just easier if I layered all these up before I start losing pieces from my table, and I'm just using my quick grab glue, which is the Burley Arts glue in a fine tip glue bottle today. And I'm just going to mention the colored embossing powders that I'm using today. I've had in my stash for quite a while now, a couple of years anyway. I've received them as part of my winning prizes for Card Maker of the Year, which was in 2023. So I really am not sure if these exact colors are still available, but any of the techniques I'm doing today, you can use using any colors at all. I just really wanted to start using up my stash, and I really wanted to make an autumnal card, and I thought that these were perfect. So there's two extra bits that to go onto those last flowers that we prepared, the little stamens, and I used the tarnished brass on these ones. Again, the same as we used on that largest flower earlier on. And I'm just using a little pokey tool, just put them in place. And these are these flowers finished. How gorgeous are these? Now let's move on to my foliage. I have two different leaf sets that I will be using on this card. And for this first one that you can see in here, I'm only adding Rustic Wilderness Distress Oxide ink. I'll not be doing much to these because I will be adding then some flowers later on to the ends of each of those dots. However, this other type of foliage that you can see in there, I'm using two different greens on. First of all, Maude Lawn, and then I will come back and add some Rustic Wilderness just on the inner section, creating a lovely gradient look. And you'll see me sprinkling clear gloss embossing powder on top of these. So I did not have any dark green or autumnal green embossing powders in my stash. I've created that look using inks, ink pads, and some clear embossing powder. Any slower drying ink pads would work perfectly for this technique, as long as they stay wet long enough for the embossing powder to stick to them. My preferred choice is the Distress Oxide ink pads, but do experiment with the ones that you have in your stash already. Or if they dry too quickly, you can reapply some sticky embossing ink on top, and you could apply your embossing powder on those. Just make sure you use a brayer so you do not ruin your embossing ink pads. And then here you can see me adding the Silk Brocade embossing powder to these small flowers, which will be going to the end of those foliage that we inked up earlier on. I need 10 of these all together, 5 onto each sprig. Once those are heat set too, it's time to start assembling our card. My favorite part of card making. So in here I'm just taking the Crackling Campfire Distress Oxide ink pads, and I'm just dragging it along the four edges of that larger layer that is going on top of the card. I'm not ink blending the color into that piece of card because I don't want it to be too overwhelming. I want the focus to be on my embellishments on this card. So this is why I am just dragging it along the edges. This will separate it from the card base enough for me to see that it's there, but it is not too overwhelming for the eye. I'm using liquid glue just to add these two pieces flat onto my card base. And for the embossed piece, I decided to go with the debossed side today, just for the simple reason that I always use the embossed side. I wanted to change it up a bit. Both of these sides of that piece just look absolutely stunning. So I really love the interest that embossed panels do give to cards. My original idea was to use that larger oval as just white, but in here I was questioning myself. So I decided to add color to the frame first to see what I like for the larger piece. And this is the Grind Espresso, which is a lovely dark brown distress oxiding. And in here I decided to add some orangey color to the large oval. Now I came in with wild honey, but the brush that I used had mustard seed on it before, so it turned out a little bit more yellow just than what I wanted it to be. I really wanted it to be a bit more orangey, so you'll see me coming in with a little bit of a crackling campfire just with my small blending brush, and then I will blend those colors together and it will result in a lovely orangey look. I thought the yellow was just a little bit too bright. So I'm just in here defining the edges just with a little bit of a crackling campfire, blending them in, and this is much more to my liking. This was something that I had in mind. To start adding a little bit of a dimension to my card, I'm raising the larger oval on foam pads, and this is how I'm going to adhere this to the center of my card. Then I'm going to take the frame and I'm just going to glue this flat in the middle of that larger oval. And then I come back and I'm going to glue those small flowers that we heat embossed with the silk brocade earlier on just to the end of those sprigs, and they have their own spot in there. Now I thought it was just easier to start gluing them like this down onto my card. So I'm starting with the foliage that are going to go in the middle, just underneath that large flower, which I have popped up on foam pads. And then all the foliage will be just going flat onto the oval, and I'm just using my hot glue to adhere everything onto my card. I will be adding the brown blooms with foam pads as well, but the other ones I will be just using some hot glue to glue underneath in there. Now repeating the same on the other side of that large flower in there, and in here you'll see me come back with a little bit of a hot glue just underneath some of those purple flowers, just the ones that touch the oval, so they're not just flapping all over the place. And in here I was faced with another decision, because I realized that it works in a portrait or a landscape orientation, but then eventually I decided to go with the portrait one, because that was my original idea, but it would look well both directions at all. For my sentiment, I'm using Thank You So Much stamped with Spice Marmalade Distress Oxiding, and I'm using my stamping platform because stamping with Distress Oxides, I do like to double stamp. Sprinkled some clear gloss embossing powder on it. Once heat set, it gets that lovely glossy finished look, which I love adding to my sentiments. In here I'm just fussy cutting around the sentiment using some scissors, but some of the sentiments have matching dies, so you can use those. I didn't have any dies to this one, so I find it just quite easy to cut around them. Now I am adding some foam pads behind the sentiment to match the height of those flowers in there already. Then I am bringing in some yellowish rhinestones, which work perfectly with my color scheme, and I'm adding a small one in the middle of each of those purple flowers. The die set does come with tiny stamen to add to those, but I just wanted to change it up a bit and use rhinestones instead today. Now, I'm not sure what happened to my footage in here, but I added some white pearls, just a very few white pearls on the two corners and on the upper part of that oval in there. My camera just stopped recording for this one. Good job I checked, because I wanted to add some sparkle to this too. So I'm adding a little bit of a dry clear glue just onto that middle flower. I'm just following the lines that are already there from embossing from the die itself. I'm using translucent glitter, which is a fine glitter, but it will not cover up the colors. It looks quite white in here, but with the magic of editing, I will be able to show you just now how lovely and super sparkly that is once the glue dries back. So here it is. I really hope you like this card as much as I do. I adore these heat embossing techniques that I used on this card. I think it turned out just gorgeous. If you like it too, make sure you interact with my video and subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet done so. I would love to have you here, and I will be back very soon with another tutorial. Thank you so much for watching. Until then, bye!